All right. So let's pretend like we haven't said anything. I don't know how. Uh, hey, Lila, how are you?
I'm good, Brian. How are you?
Oh, and you're making out okay over there?
I am, yeah. I'm home. My whole family is home, so it's nice to all be together.
Yep. And doing online courses from
Yep,
home.
yep.
So tell me a little bit about like where are you right now? If you were not at home, like if you were at school, like year, what is your degree? What is your specification? All that
hmm
type of stuff.
So I go to Boston Conservatory, and I'm finishing up my sophomore year there. It's a contemporary dance BFA is the degree that we'll graduate with at the end.
How many of you like are in that?
There are 160 total over the 4 years of dance students, but my class is pretty small, so there's only 25 of us.
Holy cow! So that was competitive, I assume, to get in.
But yeah, there was a whole audition process as well as the like application.
So like sending in like a tape or people coming to watch you perform.
We went. I went there and took a class live, and then like performed a short solo in front of a panel of faculty
How
members.
how that like completely trumps anything that I did or like most people do, where they send in their application. How was that nerve wracking?
It was, but I was doing so many
Hmm.
that after a while, I just kind of got used to it. But I don't like auditioning in general. I always get really nervous.
Like, yeah, I was gonna ask. So like now that you're a second year in and you've
Mhm.
been doing this for years at least, even though you're still getting nervous, has it gotten a little bit less so as time's gone on, or is it this exact same like from when you were in high school?
I I almost feel like it's the same,
Hmm.
if not more, just because the stakes are feel
Ah,
higher now.
that's it's actually good that you said that because like I've now been working at the church for 12 years or so, and so I think over the course of time I've maybe done 100 sermons, and it's not many. If you were doing your own church, you'd be doing a lot more, but nonetheless 100. And I would say even though I'm more comfortable in the pulpit, I have a better idea of like how to, I think, preach a better sermon. It's still like nerve wracking every time I walk up those two little steps or three steps up to the pulpit. Like I'm okay, but I definitely still feel a little jittery. And even
Yeah.
though I know these people and I've been doing this for, again, 12 years, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a little bit of nerves because like all 200 people are listening to what I have to say. So
Mhm.
that's that. Yeah, there's anxiety there. So I assume the same thing's true for you when like you're on stage, spotlight on your head. Like,
Yeah. I think performing as I've gotten older has become less stressful, and that's like one of my favorite things about dancing is getting to perform. But I think the auditions, like you never really know
hmm.
what the people are looking for, and you always just want to try your best. But
Yeah. So another question I had is someone who's as good as you are at your craft. I've heard it said before that like if you're really good at something, you know the particular like aspects of how to be good at that. And what that then leads to is you not enjoying it as much because you're not as free, but you're like so critical or so robotic and I have to do this, this, and this. Is that true? Or do you still get like enjoyment and free
I
form out of it?
I mean I do still enjoy it. But I think that was a big adjustment going to a conservatory, was dancing all day every day, and have like that is now what I'm being graded on.
Hmm.
Definitely kind of shifted my perspective a little bit, or just like shifted the way that I was taking class. So it is good to remind myself that it's not always, I have to not always be dancing for the grade, and
Mm.
just try to do it because it's something that I like.
That I can't imagine how hard that would be. So like, are your feet like mangled? Is your back like
Well,
broken?
I don't do so. I did ballet primarily for a really long time,
Okay.
and I danced on point, which is when you're like standing on your toes.
Yeah.
But since I went to the conservatory, I decided I didn't want to be a ballerina professionally.
Oh.
And so I stopped training on point because it just was not worth it.
Is it like, I remember seeing there's a movie, I think Black Swan, which was an aggressively dark.
I've never seen it actually. I'm a little bit afraid.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily going out recommend it. All of his movies are a little bit out there, but like just the pain and the agony, and not just, I assume not just your feet, but just anyone who's doing constant on your legs, constant like acrobatic or physical type of performance, just the stress on your body, let alone like your brain making sure you're doing it. But it just, you must go to bed in pain, right?
Yeah,
sometimes
pretty sore most days, especially if we have a performance coming up and there's like increased amount of rehearsals.
So before we then talk about like the transition from ballet to what you're doing now, is there any, and don't be specific, but like, is there an idea or at least a propensity for people who are doing what you do to kind of also like take pain meds, or like, is there abuse within that circle of just, again, I assume like if your body's always hurting, like at least even ibuprofen, do you see that?
I think there's like potential for that, but I also think there's a sort of culture in the dance world to be working through the pain like that, and to kind of like be enduring it without doing anything to cover it up.
Wow.
So I don't know I don't know which one is better. Something that's really common that like I use as well is like topical like tiger balm and muscle relief ointments. I feel like those are pretty common. But yeah, I mean, people take ibuprofen all the time as well. But definitely this culture to kind of be working through the pain.
Yeah, I wonder if, is that like a good thing or not? That brings me back to my days of sports. Like, just push through, And it's like, yeah, but I'm in agony too. And like at some point you wonder, as you already said with ballet, like, is the benefit worth like the effect, the negative, the pain? Or so you said you transitioned.
It was also in our just like the institution is pretty good about not enforcing that mentality, and to always be like taking care of your body and of your health. So
you feel like you're at liberty to say to like your instructor or whoever, like, man, like I just can't, like, not today.
Definitely if it's in class. I would say like, my knee is really hurting today. Can I modify the movement that we're doing? Rehearsal, especially if we're working with like an outside choreographer,
you just deal with it.
I would maybe like stay quiet, but I think that's also on a person to person basis.
Sure.
What you're comfortable with and how much pain you're in.
Right. All right. So talk a little bit about, you said you were in ballet before and then you transitioned out. Is there a big difference between what you did then with what you're doing now?
So I still have to take ballet every day as part of my training, but I just kind of decided after high school that wasn't the style that I was interested in pursuing professionally, which means that my choice of like other classes at school is a little bit different. So I take a lot more modern dance classes as well as like some jazz. We have like a bunch of styles offered for electives, so I'm kind of trying to be really versatile in my training. Yeah, modern dance. Do you want me to like talk about how it's different from ballet?
I would, yes. Treat me like I'm 5. Like I don't know anything. So you're explaining this to a 5-year-old.
Yeah, sure. So, I learned about. There was a point in time where there was this kind of movement to move away from the strictness of the ballet form. So there were a couple different modern dance pioneers like Martha Graham and Lester Horton and Jose Limon, and a bunch of other ones. Those are just a couple. who developed different techniques that are kind of just taking the opposite of what they thought that ballet is. So ballet is like really lifted and really poised, and they took a lot of movement onto the ground and made like more like angular shapes. Made like some more like spirals and like released movement.
Wow. So like if this is your studio behind you, I assume, or your makeshift studio. Yeah.
Living room studio.
Right. The Corona studio. So basically, if you were to show us like maybe something that would be a typical movement or look as you did in ballet, and as you just described it, like, and then made it more angular, like, could you actually demonstrate? Like,
sure.
Oh yeah. So
in ballet, we usually start out with a plie combination to warm up at the bar. So that's
okay.
This movement is called as plies.
Okay.
Should I get a bar out?
I don't do whatever. I don't know anything.
I don't know the best. Okay.
All right.
So we would bend and straighten and be moving our arms together.
Okay.
If I was going to be doing that in a more modern setting, I would like probably widen my base, and then I could either like curve the movement. So that's kind of like, that would be like a Jose Limon inspired plie.
Wow. Okay.
Or I could, if I was doing like a Lester Horton type of plie, I could have my arms really straight and then plie and then take my body over to the side.
Oh, cool.
Or like he does a lot of flat backs. He has a really angular style.
And so like everyone who'd be doing within that style, there'd be multiple people on stage, all kind of forming different angles to achieve.
Yeah, so that was more of like an exercise to warm up. So the actual movement is like a little more fluid. Have you heard of Alvin Ailey, the company?
I have heard of Lila Kushner. This is my entry point into this whole thing. I know nothing.
Okay. Well, maybe some of the people watching.
Yeah.
Also, Alvin Ailey's this company in New York, and they do a lot of movement that was inspired by Lester Horton's technique. And it still is like really strong and athletic and is angular, but then there are moments of release and storytelling.
So I was going to ask that part, like, does that do you feel at least this gives you a little bit more creative freedom, a little bit more story to tell than ballet, or is it just a different type of story that it's telling?
I think it's just different. And kind of a step further from modern dance, or like the more modern version, is now called contemporary dance. And that's like kind of the most freest. There's no codified technique. And that's kind of just like open to the interpretation of the choreographer. So you could see a lot of different movement styles like meshed into one dance.
And that goes well with jazz, I assume, right? I mean, because jazz, there's so much free form in the playing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So have you done like, is there any type of performance where like you have come to hear a piece cold and you're like just given the latitude to kind of move as the piece moves you? Or is it always based upon what a choreographer is telling you what to do?
Well, we take improv dance classes.
Okay.
Where that is kind of the format. We're given maybe like a prompt or music, and then just kind of, asked to move along to that. So sometimes it's a little more structured. Like we're given a list of words. Okay. And we have to come up with movement that we think like relates to that. So it could be like, I don't know. Actually, I can't.
Well, so like words like adjectives, like sadness, or like.
It could be, or it could be more like, twist, drop.
Oh, so could we try?
Yeah. Are you gonna give me words?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you some words. Let's see. I get to do some improv with you. I was not prepared for this at all. All right. So if I said like, you said you want them to be like action words, or can they be emotional words?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Whatever you want. You could say a noun.
Okay. Okay. Oh, really? Noun? All right. So let's start with tree. Okay. Sad tree. Violent wind. Holy cow. The calm after the storm. I feel like a puppeteer. This is great. That is so cool. So like in ballet, you have no ability to improv. Is it mostly all of it is choreography?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be
That's not to say that you can't improv in the style of ballet, but
right.
I haven't really had that experience.
So the great thing is though, with what you're doing now, is that allows you that opportunity to do a little bit more like, I don't say creativity, not to say ballet is not creative, but a little bit more like flexibility, right?
Yeah, and like explorative. Yeah.
So on that point, do you have any budding interest in being like involved in the choreography instead of just being a person who's doing the movements, but the person who's kind of dictating?
Yeah, definitely. I've choreographed a few pieces at the studio that I used to dance, Philadelphia Dance Theater. Which was awesome, and that was a great opportunity that my director gave me. They were like choreographed to be performed at a festival.
Oh my gosh.
It was really cool. And then I take a bunch of choreography classes at school.
So like how, again, I'm 5 years old. So like I can understand if you were, and this is just the medium that makes more sense to me. So like, in film, you have your camera, you have an idea, you have your storyboard, the shots that you want. I assume, is it somewhat similar that like you have wrote out or like drawn maybe like this is the movements I want people to do? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, so I usually like to start out with a piece of music to then like kind of be inspired by, or that I think kind of goes with the theme of maybe what I'm trying to portray. And then I feel like how I choreograph depends on the dancers who are going to be dancing my movement. And it helped at Philadelphia Dance Theater that I had sort of grown up with the students, my peers that I was choreographing on, so I knew their styles pretty well. And then I sometimes write out movement, like when I'm at home, just because then it's makes the process go faster if you already kind of know what you want to ask your dancers to do. But I've also found that it can be pretty collaborative. Like, you kind of try to describe something, like, can I see your interpretation of that?
Just for a second, I want to pivot from the actuality of what you do to the emotional side of it. So this is just a question that went through my mind, and I could be completely making something up. But I assume a lot of the time for you or people who do what you do, a lot of the practice when you're by yourself is in front of a mirror, or like just evaluating your own performance, and then of course hearing feedback from others. But how do you not beat yourself up, or like, when you feel like you're not achieving something to a certain level of standard, how do you not give up early on when it just doesn't look the way that you want? Like, is it just keep pushing through? That's one question. And the second one would be like, being that you're in front of a mirror, your own and other people's, how do you get over yourself and become more confident and be like, I'm just going to be dancing, moving around, and people are watching me and I'm cool with that? Like, how?
Yeah, that's a hard question, especially since I started when I was so young that
Right.
it kind of feels normal.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely hard not to, get too hard on yourself. Um, and I think that just is, yeah, kind of a day to day thing. And, just telling yourself that even if something doesn't happen one day, that doesn't mean that it won't the next.
Right.
Um,
It almost seems like what a great source of confidence this would be to not just, I hate to always frame like young women. I mean, there's men doing this too, so young people. But
mhm,
just because I do think that girls, I think, are a little bit more subject to like harassment and like how your body is portrayed, and to the other people, how people like respond to a female moving around. Like it just must give you, and maybe I'm again imagining this, a sense of confidence and peace about yourself, a little bit more self-esteem, that like you've done this since you were so long in front of so many people that like, is that
I
true?
I think it gives um, sort of a heightened awareness to your body and also like a heightened respect for what it can do. But I don't
Mm,
think that, I mean, I wish it were the case that like it would make you feel more confident to like be in
oh,
front of the mirror, but I think that's not always the case. And because you're always looking at yourself, often wearing like tight clothes, I think that can be
yeah.
challenging. And it's the dance world is definitely evolving to be more inclusive, but sort of historically, dancers kind of like represent a certain body type. So,
That's what I was gonna. Yeah, it seems like it, I assume not that dissimilar to the fashion industry, right? With the
right.
models, it's like all the clothes are designed for this look. Like, I mean, I bet she'd be unthrilled that I'm saying this, but like, Anya's short. She's about like 5'2", maybe, and she's busty, but like doesn't have like the appearance that a lot of the models who wear the clothes that she likes,
Mm-hmm.
and so basically she'll see something hanging on a particular model, like that looks great, and then inevitably she gets it and it looks not the way she envisioned it, and it just feels like there's not many styles that are being crafted to her body type. And then I imagine, as you just mentioned, like if you don't fit that tallish, slenderish person, like do they give you people, do they give those people a chance? Like, are you kind of written off right from the jump?
Well, I think that like depends completely on what institution you're trying to train in. But
Mm,
I think that also the dance world has come a long way in
okay,
being more inclusive.
that's good.
And especially, I've been really fortunate to work with instructors who are pretty much all of them like really supportive of anybody,
Yeah.
as long as you're going to put in the work.
Right. So honest question, do you love what you do and where you are right now? Or do you feel like this was the path you've been doing for so long that it's just, this is what you know?
No, I really, I do. Um, and I mean, I went to like a pretty rigorous high school too, so I think it was never, I never felt like I maybe couldn't pursue something else, and this was the only thing that I knew. Um,
Yeah.
but it also is like very stressful, kind of all the time thinking about my future and after school, um, having to audition for companies and there being so much uncertainty about finding jobs after I graduate.
And especially now, right? I mean, I think for anyone I was talking to when we did the first one with the kids who are in their mid 20s, not kids, they're young adults, obviously, but like Scott Bound, who's like in the city doing like in the entertainment industry, and they got closed down almost immediately in New York. And you just wonder about like, are a lot of these houses that support the arts, these studios, are they just gonna like be unable to come back after they can't pay their rent? And like, what does that do to art? And that's a big concern. Is all industry obviously is under attack, but like the arts and things that aren't deemed essential, and yet we all know if you appreciate art that they make your soul sing. This is what makes us feel alive as a human being. Like, I pray that those places will still be available when we're out of this.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I mean, the thing about like training is that everybody's pretty much in the same situation. So I don't feel like I'm falling behind in that way. But it is
Sure.
true, like it's really hard to say kind of, yeah, what will still be available. I mean, I also on the bright side, I'm hoping that this situation is kind of spurring a new appreciation for the arts. And maybe when we're out of this, maybe people will, I don't know, try to fund more, give
Oh, I
more.
think you're right. I think you're so right. I think like all of us who, even if you had no creativity before, but especially if you did, you're basically bound to whatever your walls are around your house, maybe your little neighborhood, but like it's stifling. And so I think all of us, and again, this is me generalizing, are just gonna, when the doors do open, like get me the hell out of here. Like let me do something, and let it not be looking at a screen, but
Yeah.
like doing something physical, or just being like your wings are finally like untethered and you're able to flap and fly away. I think that's going to be true. And I hope that you're right during this part of time where it feels so hard to be involved in the entertainment industry, the arts, where like, yeah, like museums are doing a lot of incredible stuff, putting like free tours, national parks are doing that. Like I see artists that are doing like, you know, home concerts from their house, acoustic sets, like that's all great. And it really is great, but it's still a shade of what we were used to, that I'm hoping that this is going to heighten, as you said, that appreciation for, man, that's the stuff that makes us feel alive. So
Mm-hmm.
let's really support that when we're back, and not just the stuff that, you know, is the common everyday way of life. I don't know. I'm trying to be hopeful. It's hard. But you know, like the thing that you said before, that we, at least I asked you before, is like, I've often wondered if me being involved in church since I was a boy, and then like me being heavily invested in like in a youth group, and then just felt like all the dominoes were like set up, that when they started falling, it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just fall with them and go into ministry. And that's not to say I don't feel passion for it. I do, but I did never had like the call story that some people have, where they felt like God really is telling me that this is where I need to be. That took a long time for me to get to that, and actually took me to do work in the church for me to start saying, yeah, this feels right. And that ultimately led to me pursuing my ordination. But has that also in some sense true for you, like you doing it, you like being in that moment, physically acting like, this is why I do this?
Yeah, especially when we have a performance.
Mm.
Um, I think that makes like all the stress and the hard moments worth it. But
Yeah.
I mean, when I was making my decision, like to go into a conservatory program for dance, I think it did sort of feel like the natural next step, but I also kind of looked at it as like, you know, this is a career that I would have to pursue when I'm young. And if, you know, it like doesn't work out, there's ways, you know, I can go into like physical therapy or something. There's ways to sort of branch off of this
Right. That's a
path.
good point. Yeah, it's not just like, well, she's in ballet and that's the end of that. Like,
And
no,
I
there's
figured
ways.
I should at least give it a shot, like while my body can still handle it.
And you've already put all the time into it. And so like a part of the,
Yeah,
what I left out was part of my decision too to go to seminary, was like, I've done so much that it almost feel like just to pull the plug before even giving it that shot
right.
would be like, why did I do this the last 15
I
years
know,
of my life? Right.
oh, definitely.
Yeah. Like, why did you sacrifice all those 9 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays
Right.
during high school, if not to go that next step?
Yeah.
So like, if you then had if you, let's say we're still talking to me, we're talking, you know, to someone who is younger and doing this, like if you had their full attention, like what would be tips, advice, things that they can work on during this time where they might have a lot more time? Like, doesn't have to be just physically if you have something to show them, but also like, what could you give them as advice?
Yeah. Well, the first thing would be to stretch
Mm,
a lot. I am not super naturally flexible, and I wish that I had stretched more when I was younger before my like joints started,
no kidding.
you know, solidifying a little bit more. And you know, it's still something that I do. I still stretch every day, but I think that when you're young, getting into that habit is really, really valuable.
Oh my gosh, especially because when you're young, you feel like you don't have to. Like,
Right.
so
Exactly.
I'm 38, right? And so like if I play tennis, I have to stretch now. In a way, I always laughed at my father, like, look at this guy like bending over for 15 minutes where I was young. I'm like, I'm just gonna get out there and play. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it would have helped me a lot more to be, as you said, in the practice of stretching, but probably also would have helped my pathetic joints to do that when I was younger. I think,
Yeah,
yeah, young people take that for granted.
definitely. I definitely did, and I don't want to say regret, but it saved me a lot of, yeah.
So how long? Like, what do you think for stretch?
So you should hold a stretch for at least 30 seconds.
Oh,
Feel
okay.
good.
And any type of stretch or like,
Well, it's if you're like holding, if it's a stagnant stretching position. So if
okay.
I'm like, doing a lunge, I want to hold that for 30 seconds. And another thing is like to try not to move around too much in the stretch and really just like let yourself settle into it.
Mm. In some ways,
Um,
that's like yoga, right? I
yeah,
mean,
and then like breathing into the stretch is something that we practice a lot.
okay.
Cool. So that would be my biggest like physical piece of advice.
Okay. Stretching.
Stretching and doing a lot of like abdominal
Yeah.
exercises.
Would you also say like to the kids who like it's so much physical labor and the amount of time is taxing, like would you say don't give up? Like what would be a way to give people the extra push they might need to say, you know what, this is worth it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, definitely don't give up if it's something that you love to do. I always think, when I'm stretching now, I'm like, oh, I don't really need to stretch. Like, I'm not going to be doing anything the next day. But thinking of, how much time we have and how much I can improve on my own. And then, I don't know, something I always like to think about is going back to school in the fall or
Ugh, hopefully.
spring.
Right.
And, my teachers being like, oh my goodness, look how much you worked.
Or look, oh my goodness, you
Right,
can't move.
right, exactly.
Right. All right. So stretching. Okay. And then in the sense of like, you mentioned some of those names before, which of course I never heard of. Can people like find those people on YouTube? Like what would be a great way to find those?
Yeah, YouTube is a really, really good resource. Even just looking up, like modern dance companies,
Hmm.
I think you'll get so many videos.
And you have a performance thing that we potentially could try to watch, right?
I do.
All right. Should we give that a try?
We can, yeah.
Okay. Sweet.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
see?
Then I think if you do full screen, I see. Yeah. I see your computer. So like click that big box,
Oh
that
no,
little.
wait, I can't hear you anymore.
Well, all right.
Okay, I
So
stopped.
after you do that, right? Make sure you just enter into full screen,
Yes.
and then just hit play, and then then when you're done, hit stop, and then we'll talk.
Okay, all right.
All right.
I'm I'm the second one, slightly behind. you want to keep going, or does that feel good?
That felt, I mean, that was
Yeah,
awesome.
that feels long. Okay,
That
stop.
was so cool. Like, so, I mean, so many questions went through my brain. First, though, a comment like that for me is a little bit more appealing than ballet, which is, I don't know why, but it just felt a lot more interesting and engaging to me. Um, but again, coming from a completely novice point of view, is it generally like that where there's not a lot of set design, no singing? Is it mostly just music and straight up dance?
Definitely in modern dance, yeah, it tends to be like a sparser stage, more just focused on the movement than yeah, any set. And I don't want to say like it's exclusively instrumental music,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like that tends to be the preference.
I mean, so I guess this would appeal to a different type of person in the sense that, you know, for me it works because the focus is directly on you guys. Where not to say ballet isn't,
Right.
but it's just there's a lot, you know, so it can be distracting of what you're paying attention to. And so I loved the strict and sparse like focus on
Mhm.
the movements. And so like some of those things was like holy cow, like they're really incredible to watch, and not to say again ballet isn't, but there's just times where I was just caught up in like the flakes falling or you know whatever else might be going on that you not my exposure again is nutcracker from
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
uh and so like but that was really impressive. So that would be the type of thing to expect if at your school or also just in general within that genre. Is that correct?
Yeah, and this was definitely one choreographer's choice of movement, and I would almost say that this was a little bit more on the simplistic and
Mm,
less athletic side of what contemporary dance is. I feel like now that there's almost like more acrobatic-y type stuff
really?
that's being incorporated. Well, that's maybe I don't know. There's more. There's more like bigger jumps and
Mm.
floor work and handstand stuff.
So like what we just watched, like how much
There was no
time?
jumps in this, but
Say what?
I was just adding on like there's a lot of lifts now in contemporary dance, and this particular piece like didn't have a whole lot of contact between dancers.
Okay, yeah, I was noticing that it actually looked like it
Yeah.
was very intentional not to. I mean, there was a
Right.
moment where like I think you got thrust away and then
Mm-hmm.
came back too, which I kind of like seeing that movement. But my last question then on that front was going to be in the sense of, I mean, how to word this. It was in my head and now it's like completely escaped. What were we saying?
Slightly sparser stage. Contemporary dance is now
Ah, I
athletic.
got it. I
Okay.
remember. So like just you played 4.5 minutes of an 8-minute piece.
Mm-hmm.
How much time went into the prep of just getting through those 4 minutes?
Um,
Like how much? Yeah, like
well,
months.
the whole piece we started working on in like September of last year, and we performed this in March.
Okay.
But I will say it was a student choreographed piece, so we weren't using actual school time. We were rehearsing at nights, and we were only rehearsing like once a week.
Wow. And is it like music in the sense, again, this is from a novice, where if I'm learning a piece, I do like a section, a section, a
Yeah.
section. Is that so you do a couple minutes and then you build, you build, you build?
Sometimes, I mean, we don't always go in order. Sometimes, like, she worked on the duet with me and that girl for a little while. And then we went back and, like, learned some group stuff and sort of, like, inserted that chunk in
Wow.
later.
Lila, this has been so like impressive to me because, you know, I have had obviously some exposure to you before, like on one particular stage, right? And I know that you've done this stuff, but it's different to hear about it from like, you know, like this is what you're doing, but to actually listen to you for about an hour and then watching it is completely different altogether. And so like thank you for allowing me into your living room, so to speak, and being so open about like what you've taken, what you've done to get to where you are, but also what does that actually look like as a final product so much.
Yeah, no, it was cool to be able to share.
So we'll maybe have to do it again.
Yes.
And next time I'll come prepared. Like I'll have a Radiohead piece ready to go.
Okay.
And instead of me saying like turbulent wind or something, they'll just put on a music. You'll have to do something like that. That would be awesome.
Okay. And that, you guys, would be an activity you could do at home.
Ah.
Really bored is write down a list of words and then come up with movement.
So, and on that last, I know I said last question, this would be the last question then maybe. So like I know when I said that stuff before, were you just completely like letting yourself go freely? Like when I said, I think like violent wind, like,
right.
Or was that practiced?
Yeah, it wasn't practiced, but I think I chose some movement that felt sort of familiar.
I
didn't like try any like completely new trick or something.
I mean, as someone who's so poor at dancing, like my best dance is a slow dance. Like I just feel like I would get in my way and not let my body move. And I imagine that's probably one of the first hurdles in this whole thing, from ballet to modern dance, is just allowing yourself to be free.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we work on.
How do you work on that? Like, what does it mean?
Well, yeah, in our improv classes, like there's curtains over the mirrors, so we close those so we're not looking at ourselves.
Oh.
A lot of times we're all dancing at the same time, but doing things separately instead of having like people watch us. So you're not having your classmates watch you. You're just kind of exploring.
That makes a lot more sense, because I was, again, what we talked about before is being in front of a mirror. Like I'd be judging myself all the time.
Oh yeah, no, it's like, at least for me, it's so difficult to improv with a mirror.
It was like, I remember one of the classes I took in seminary was, I think, speech. It wasn't preaching, it was speech. And what they did was they videotaped everyone doing a poem, and then you would watch it back and you were part of your grading process. But it wasn't so much the grading process, it was also just for the first time watching yourself on camera. And it was horrible, because I mean, and it was great because you saw all these weird, like, nervous tics that you did without knowing. And I might have said this to you before, I can't remember what youth group I told, but like, for some reason back then, whenever I was in between a thought, I would always do something like, I'd lick my lips, and I'm watching this video, I'm like, stop, like, please just stop licking your lips. And like, so in some sense it was really great, because I saw this horrible tic that I was able to solve because of the, like, just watching myself on video.
Well, and that's maybe been a tiny bit of a silver lining for this working from home thing, is that with a lot of our school, we're sending in recorded videos of ourselves, and I hate watching myself on video. So yeah, noticing things that I do, or just kind of overcoming that.
So like, when you're done with something, do you just send it in and never watch it again?
No, I watch it before I send it in.
But like, after you've sent it, are you just like, I don't want to
watch it again?
That is it's so true. Like, after
the time that I've watched this video performance. Yeah.
It's so true. Like, so after, like, if I preach or do anything, like, the last thing you could ever get me to do would be listen to myself. I don't want to, it's done. It's over. I don't want to hear myself. I don't want to look at myself. Yeah.
Well, and especially if maybe you feel the same way, but if we have a show or something and you feel like it went really well, and then if I watch it back, then I'm going to sort of ruin that.
Totally. Like, my cousin, I've now said this would be the last thing I said 10 minutes ago. I'm sorry. This will be the last. But like, my cousin, who worked at the Met, she was like incredible. She was one of 8 art restorers to study in Italy. And she was like behind the scenes working on masterpieces. And I remember going on a tour with her and seeing like these masterpieces just lying like on the ground, so to speak. They weren't on the ground, but it's like, oh my God. But I remember her saying to me was something along the lines of, it's this incredible blessing, this incredible gift, and it's also this incredible curse, because now when she'll go into like a museum or something, instead of just being like me, or even like use like, oh, look at this, like, oh, Monet really, she'll see what the restorer did or did not do.
Oh,
And
wow.
so like, it's like, so she needs to turn off that brain that is so interested in like fixing a mistake or what can be done to like improve upon like time and weather and history, that it's like, how do you just become the innocent like person who's just amazed because they don't know? It's like magic in that sense, right? Like
Yeah.
you watch this trick, it's like, oh, it blew you away. But when you find out how it's done, like, it's a little bit less.
Right.
Well, in any event, thanks. That's for another day. But thanks again for your time. And by all means, keep sane in this
Yeah.
dreadful era.
You as well.
Thanks, Lila. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. This is
All
fun.
right. All right. Yep. Bye.
Bye.